Today's episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street partners with businesses, organisations, unions and social democratic parties across the globe to train leaders, develop engagement strategies and empower people to organise for change. And in 2021, Dunn Street will continue to work with folks that want to make a difference, inspire, give hope and enable leadership to achieve their shared purpose under conditions of uncertainty. To find out how Dunn Street can partner with you, hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left political and cultural podcast that dives into the progressive issues of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. And following on from our pop culture podcast last week with Tess Farrell, we're doing another one this week whilst we're just enjoying our summer break. I know some of you are all starting to get back into the swing of things. This week, we're going to review the mini-series Mrs. America that was on Binge or Foxtel Showcase or something in Australia. It was on Hulu in the US and the BBC for our UK listeners. So we'll unpack that TV series with Tess in a moment. Don't forget to subscribe to Socially Democratic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon or Stitcher. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and give us a review. And for all the updates on each of the episodes, just follow Dunn Street at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Okay, let's get to today's episode. We're taping this one on a Wednesday afternoon in sunny Melbourne. And this is our second week back for Socially Democratic from the break. And as promised, we were going to do not just one, but two episodes that were going to be a pop culture style podcast where we review some stuff on either film or TV. Last week, we reviewed the TV series The Politician. And this week, we're going to review the TV series, or miniseries, I should say, Mrs. America. And back joining me through popular demand is our resident pop culture expert, Tess Farrell. Hello.
Hello, Stephen. I think we need maybe an ABC fact check on by demand. I have no idea if people enjoyed the last episode or not, but I certainly did, and I hope they did. I really enjoy my new title of pop culture correspondent for Dunn Street. Probably my favourite title that I have so far in life. So thank you. It's great to be here.
You're most welcome. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Now,
2021 is going to be much better than 2020.
I know someone tweeted on Sunday night, and that ends the first week of 2021.
I'm hopeful still, though.
Well, okay, so a confession to our audience here. Last week's episode, you may have picked up that it wasn't recorded last week. We were a little bit too clever, and Tess and I decided that, well, it's not a time-sensitive episode because we're just reviewing a TV show and there's no spoilers in there, so there's no sort of time date. So let's do it before Christmas. And that way it would give me and you a chance to have some holidays, and I could just punch it up on the Friday as we do most episodes. So when we recorded that episode, in the opening remarks, I said that there's not a great deal happening right now because we're probably all at the beach or at the cricket or just chilling at home and reading books and watching TV. And it's also a very quiet time on the media front. So we thought we would just review a bunch of TV shows to get you through the summer break. Who knew that there was going to be a white supremacist insurrection on the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. the day that they were counting the Electoral College votes? Didn't see that coming.
I mean, maybe I saw that coming. But yeah, we've been caught out. So we won't be doing that again.
I clearly have not learned the lesson of the Trump presidency that there is not one boring week that goes by without something happening. So this one we are definitely recording reasonably live. As I said, it's Wednesday. This will be up on Friday. And on today's episode, we are going to be reviewing the TV miniseries Mrs. America, which is a historical drama, a 9-part miniseries that's streamed on Hulu in the United States. I think it's now available on Binge in Australia and on BBC iView or BBC Player in the UK for our UK listeners. It was created by, I'm not sure how to pronounce her first name, but I think it's Darby Waller. She is known for her past work as both a screenwriter and a co-producer for seasons 3 and 4 of Mad Men, and also was a writer on Desperate Housewives. And the central plot for Mrs. America, it's loosely based on the story of the 1970s movement to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, which was an amendment to the United States Constitution to outlaw discrimination based on gender, and the backlash from the conservatives, led by a woman by the name of Phyllis Schafflee, who was played by Cate Blanchet. And it's a 9-part series that takes on the campaign journey to ratify the ERA through the eyes of Schlafly. That's going to be really hard to say. I'm going to call her Phyllis for the rest of the episode. And the second wave feminists, including Gloria Steinem, played by Byrne, another Aussie, Betty Frieden, played by Tracy Orman, Representative Shirley Chisholm, played by Uzo Aduba, Bella Abzug, played by Margot Martindale, who you'll know her from The Americans, and Jill Ruckelshaus, played by Elizabeth Banks. And each episode basically focuses on one particular character in the series as we learn more about their own narrative, but also intertwines it with the overarching plot and narrative of the show. But I guess the mainstays throughout really is Phyllis Schafflee and, to a lesser extent, Gloria Steinem. So that's kind of the plot. My first question to you, Tess Farrell. Did you even know about this moment in political history?
I'm going to be exposed here as a terrible, terrible feminist, but no. I really have very little knowledge about this moment, very little knowledge about the Equal Rights Amendment at all. So this was really all new to me. I mean, I had no idea who Phyllis Schlafly was. I hope I pronounced that right. But I did know who, obviously, Gloria Steinem and a few of the other main characters. But this was a real education piece for me.
And same here, knew nothing about this. So I really enjoyed the series, even just from a political and historical perspective. I kind of found the journey fascinating. And I was trying not to furiously Google as we watched the show, because I don't like doing that. But there was just so much that I was learning as we went. I was like, I'd like to know more about that. So I resisted doing it until towards the end of the 9 episodes, and then went into a Google black hole or Wikipedia black hole on the whole ERA and the feminist movement and the counter movement led by the conservatives, which led to the moral majority and a whole bunch of other things. And really, I think one of the things I took away from it is it's quite contemporary, because particularly what's been going on under the Trump presidency, a lot of this is the foundations of this kind of moral crusade by the conservative element of the Republican Party. So it was incredibly interesting for me.
Yeah, same. I mean, it is an interesting look at how conservative women organised and how they talk to each other, and, writing newsletters and all that kind of stuff. I found that incredibly fascinating because I guess as members of the Labor movement, we always looked at progressives and how they organise. So I thought it was a really good insight into how conservative women have started grassroots organising. And it was great. It was a really good piece of history to learn for me.
That's a very good point, actually. In my time as a party official and doing the work of organising, electoral organising in particular, there's been moments when people have asked me, Stephen, do the Liberals do this, or do you ever foresee them doing this? And I've always answered them and said, well, they're doing it in the United States and they have been doing it for generations. So there's no reason why our conservative opponents here in Australia can't get organised as well. And I'm sure they're sort of doing it to a certain degree. But yeah, this definitely proves that, you know, the main character, Phyllis, was an incredibly organised woman, and not single-handedly, but certainly, as we learn in this story, began the fight back to the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, which is an incredible story in itself. So how would you best describe Mrs. America and the tone of the show to someone who's yet to watch it?
Mrs. America is Mad Men, I guess, for women, about women. But I think I would probably more describe it as The Crown, you know, a real historical dive into, you know, the women's rights movement in America. And it really is, you said you were trying not to get Googling, but I found it that I did the same thing with The Crown, was that I would sit there and watch it, but I'd be Googling at the same time, which I didn't mind, you know. We can do 2 screens at once, right? Yeah, so it's got, in terms of look and feel, it's very Mad Men. In terms of, you know, the content, it's more like The Crown. It's like, is this true? Who is this person? What did they look like in real life? You're doing that alongside watching it. It's a bit slow. It can be a bit slow in certain episodes. It's not one of those things that you want to get to the end and you're going to binge watch exactly. You're more just learning as you go along, but it's very beautiful to watch. And you'll certainly get into a Wikipedia black hole watching it. It's pretty dark. I didn't find it particularly hopeful at all. It's historical. So yeah, Mad Men vibes plus The Crown.
Yeah, that's a good... when I read some of the reviews, they talked about that. I just didn't feel... I've only just recently binged Mad Men. I think we did all 7 seasons of Mad Men during the second Victorian lockdown. I think I drank as much as Don Draper did throughout the show. I thought it went drink for drink for him. That was a bit of a challenge, which I think I succeeded. Mad Men's very fresh in my mind. And then I think we might have actually then jumped off of Mad Men and then went on to, by complete coincidence, not knowing that it was the same creator, to Mrs. America. I felt like I didn't see that tone. And a lot of people had written it as if, Mad Men ended with Don Draper, yoga retreat, sitting on top of a hill with his eyes closed, dreaming of how he's going to embrace the 1970s through a Coke ad. And then we flip to Mrs. America, and it's 1972. The Senate have just passed the amendment to the ERA, and thus begins this campaign. And it's now the story of mad women in the 1970s. I didn't feel like it had that Mad Men tone to me. I don't know why. Maybe I need to go back and watch it again, but I thought it moved faster than Mad Men. That was one of my, if you and I ever did do a review of Mad Men, one of my criticisms of it was, my God, it was slow. Whereas I thought the pacing of Mrs. America was actually quite good. Now, we watched it as Hulu updated it. So I think by watching it on binge, you had all 9 episodes you could just watch them, couldn't you, from memory? Whereas I was waiting each Sunday night for the next episode, and I was really looking forward to it. So I found the pacing quite good.
Right. Well, that's an interesting look at how you consume TV, right? And how it's meant to be consumed, because it's Hulu, sorry. But dripping it week by week, yes, you probably would want to keep watching it. But sitting there, they're long episodes, they're almost an hour. Watching them, I think I watched it over 3 nights, and I found it too slow, but too slow for me. But I think also because each episode is defined by a character, that you're not getting the emotional attachment to the characters like you are in Mad Men, right? You're getting a glimpse into one of them, a deep dive into one of them, and then they move on the next week. So you can't really be invested in the same way as Mad Men. But it certainly got the glamour, the same glamour feel to it as Mad Men does. And it's the same time period. I think I never finished Mad Men.
It definitely did have that. It felt like that they just, with the sets and the costumes, all that kind of design. I felt like they just went back to the Mad Men studio and just grabbed everything that they used in the final the final season, and just kept going with it, because that was excellent. At the time, I was furiously hunting for a mid-century office lamp, and I found myself constantly looking at all the lamps, both in Mad Men and in Mrs. America. Sometimes I wasn't even paying attention to the plot. I was just literally scouring the sets for lamps every time, going, oh, that's a good lamp. I like that lamp there. So the sets were excellent and spot on. I enjoyed that immensely. Shall we talk? Any other thoughts about the overview of it before we start to dive into the main characters?
No, I think you've got it now down. I mean, I don't normally try to find lamps via television shows, so that's an interesting tidbit from you, Stephen.
I'm happy with the lamp I got in the end too. I'll post it. I'll post it online.
Glad.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the main characters, starting with Phyllis Schafflee. Talk to me about her character, played by Cate Blanchet.
Well, just as a starting point, Cate Blanchet is amazing and can do no wrong. I didn't even see Cate Blanchet as his character. She was Phyllis. So she's a conservative American woman, Chicago-based, right?
Mm.
And she is a wife and a mother, and she's essentially the conservative mouthpiece for conservative women all across America. She writes a newsletter that gets distributed fairly widely, and she's just working all her sort of Republican women's sort of networks. I don't know. I tried to find an Australian comparison and I couldn't come to mind. You might have one, Stephen, but she's kind of like Miranda Devine kind of vibes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So she wasn't a congresswoman, she wasn't a senator, but she was often the go-to person to go for the conservative point of view. But I mean, she did really great work. I mean, they ended up stopping the ratification of the ERA. And that was due to the organizing that she did. So there was, lots of moments in the TV series where she's doing public appearances, plus balancing her home life, and her values and her ideals for what, she wanted, versus those of her husband. And I found that really interesting. So for Mad Men fans, gosh, I think we're going to say Mad Men more than we say Mrs. America in this episode. But her husband is played by John Slattery, who is also in Mad Men, but I know him for the Sex and the City character, who he also plays a politician in that. And he pees on Carrie Bradshaw, which is very interesting. I hope everyone's seen that Sex and the City episode. So I liked watching sort of her navigate sort of her ambitions versus her husband's, who kind of was happy for her to go out there and be the public face, but still wanted her to be home and, get everything done.
Yeah.
Be a mother.
Mother of 6. Her husband let her run for Congress twice, but as she points out, these were unwinnable contests, and he is not keen on her running in a winnable race because she does not want her to become a congresswoman, but that is her deepest desire. She's an expert in nuclear policy, but no one takes her seriously, and we discover this in the first 2 or 3 episodes. And she manipulates men to work out how can she elevate her public profile so that she can put herself in a position where she can get elected to Congress, and decides that she will use the ERA campaign, which originally she did not care about at all, but to campaign against it to win the respect of men within the Republican Party. So there's a cunning to her that we first discover within the first 2 or 3 episodes, I think it really sort of sets the tone of her character. Given that she's on the right side of the political spectrum, do you ever find yourself having sympathy for her?
Yes, I do. I mean, she is so caught up in what she thinks is right. She can't, she can't really get out of the situation that she is in. And I think this is a bit of a spoiler, but I don't think too big of a spoiler. One of her sons is gay. And, I found that incredibly difficult. The son trying to hide that, Phyllis trying to hide that, and sort of, I think that humanized her a little bit in terms of sort of how difficult that must be when the world around you is different to what you're preaching. But for the most part, she was very cunning, and I didn't feel all that much sympathy for her because she was pretty cutthroat when it comes to getting what she wanted and pushing her beliefs on other people.
I felt that whilst I think she is the main character and the central character of this series, she's not the heroine of the show, but in the writing, I think they give her respect to her ability to organise, her commitment to her cause, and obviously her cunningness to win. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely.
Any other thoughts on Phyllis before we move on to Gloria?
Can we please move on to Gloria now?
We can.
I'm ready.
Okay. Gloria Steinem, played by Rose Byrne. So 2 Aussie actresses are the main 2 people of this show, which is pretty cool, just in itself, from an Australian perspective. Tell me about Rose Byrne playing Gloria Steinem. What are your thoughts?
I love Rose Byrne so much. I think I like her more than Cate Blanchet. I think she was the perfect person to play Gloria Steinem. But I'm going to be honest with you, I forget a lot of the storylines with Gloria Steinem because I was just focused on how pretty Rose Byrne looked. She had the hair, she had the awesome flair, she had the sunglasses, like whatever else Gloria was doing, I didn't really notice because she was definitely the glamorous part of the show, the very cool and trendy person that I've only really come to know Gloria Steinem as she is as an older adult. And so I didn't realize that she was that beautiful, that she was the person that they put up as the beautiful feminist, not the bra burning feminist, the older woman, the young one. So I didn't realize that sort of she copped that much crap for, being beautiful, or that, that's how she was used for many campaigns and for the movement. So yeah, throughout the show, they sort of cover off quite personal things about her and her work at Ms. Magazine, which was a really popular feminist magazine in the 70s. Why wasn't she married? Why she never chose to marry? And then going into her abortion as well. So I really enjoyed seeing sort of the more personal aspects of Gloria Steinem's life and how she fit in with the rest of the other feminists in the show, and how she was sort of the public face. And then there were, the congresswomen and, both Republican and Democrat and lawyers that they all had to sort of work together to get stuff done.
Yeah, the complexity to her character was that, as you said before, you found it hard to pay attention to what was going on because of her beauty. But, those that criticised her, particularly within the feminist movement, said that she got to where her rapid rise within the feminist movement to a significant national leadership position. The criticism of her was because of her beauty. But at the same time, she's an incredibly intelligent woman. She launched this, Ms. Magazine. She's got her own opinion. She's very, very well organised. She's trying to pull together a coalition. And I think she feels that her beauty is actually undermining her authority within the movement. So it's just sort of, you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't kind of situation for Steinem.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's often what it's like being a woman in politics and in the movement. You can't be too pretty, you can't be too ugly. You got to be smart, but not too smart. It's definitely reflected in the show.
And then let's talk about some of the other characters. The supporting cast, and starting with let's move through from the left to the right to start off with, perhaps. On the left, we have Betty Frieden, played by Tracy Orman, who I guess her character is she wrote The Feminist Mystique, and 10 years on from writing this famous piece of literature, she's still craving attention. Tell us more about Betty's character, and what were your thoughts on her being played by Tracy Orman?
Betty was one of my favourite characters. Again, this was a big learning piece for me, so I didn't know she wrote The Feminine Mystique, but I have done some heavy Googling since. I really enjoyed the aspect of Betty, so I guess an older generation feminist, certainly older than Gloria Steinem, and the kind of juxtaposition between her and the younger feminists, because Betty at this point was sort of losing her cool, right? She was very easily angered, made statements to the media that didn't align with a lot of the other work the other characters were doing, like Gloria and Jill Ruckelshaus, who's Elizabeth Banks's character. So I love that, because that's so real. You get to a certain age, in politics, and people just go, oh, that person just shut up. You are no longer relevant. Please stop harming the movement or the party by continuing to make comments that are not in line with our current policies or whatever. So I really enjoyed her character. She was great.
Representative Shirley Chisholm, who was aiming to become the first black woman president, is in this battle within the movement, and that her character is played by Uzo Aduba. Your thoughts on the Shirley Chisholm character?
Well, first off, Uzo won an Emmy for her portrayal of Shirley Chisholm, so that's a little tidbit for you. This again was a really interesting character, and I think in Shirley's character, just the heartbreak of how difficult it would have been not just to be a woman at this time in the political sphere, and the work that would have had to go into running, but also being a black woman, just incredibly difficult. And she was alone. She didn't have, any other sort of allies that looked like her. So she really was sort of the first of many things. And I think she went on to nominate for president, I think, for the Democrats. That was, her episode was, for me, pretty heartbreaking, because you just really saw how hard she had to struggle to get to where she was, and to keep fighting even when she was sort of elected.
And it's one of the first times they introduced into the conversation the question about intersectionality between the civil rights movement and gender equality. It's actually an area that I was interested in, and I guess we'll get to it maybe a bit later on. But in terms of one of the areas I was disappointed in the show, that they didn't continue to explore that. We really didn't see Shirley Chisholm's character much more after episode 3 from memory, and I was disappointed in that, because I thought that there was going to be more contribution by her across the 9 episodes. And maybe that's probably a broader fault, generally speaking, is that they're all such strong, independent characters that you'd like to learn more about them, but you only kind of, apart from Steinem and Phyllis, you kind of only get you get one episode where you deep dive on them, but then that's kind of it. You don't really, they move in and out of scenes, but it's not, that character arc kind of ends, doesn't it, on that particular episode? And it certainly did for Shirley Chisholm in episode 3.
Yeah, that's right. And that's my criticism of the show throughout. You're only scratching the surface, and you definitely want to know more each episode, but they don't really return back, except for sort of cameo appearances, with the exception of Phyllis and Gloria. So, you know, Shirley Chisholm probably deserves her own miniseries. Maybe there is one.
There is a film apparently coming out about her.
Great.
So that answers that problem right there. Bella is it Abzug?
I'm not the expert on this, but yeah, let's roll with that. Bella Abzug.
Which is played by Margot Martindale, who I guess is she's posed as the ultimate pragmatist, and a lot of the scenes are based out of her office in DC. Thoughts on Bella?
Yeah, she's great. She's the operator. She's the, you know, the mother of them all, the one that gets things done, the one that gets them a meeting with the president. She's the real, I don't know, I think she's the real leader behind the scenes of all of the group. And she's a great character. And I was reading that, so she was a lawyer and then she was elected to Congress, and her first campaign, it was her that said, you know, a woman's place is in the House of Representatives, which is now like commonly used, I think. And I think it was her that used it for the first time. But also Margot Martindale is always just a joy to watch. Very comforting.
Yeah, she's fantastic. When she was first introduced into the show, I was like, oh, this is going to be good. Because I think Margot, anything this woman touches turns to gold. I think she's a fantastic actress. And she played, not that I know anything about her particular character really, but I loved her. By the end of it, I was like, oh, let's do a spin-off show about her. Like, she was hysterical. Like, she just was calling it as it is throughout, which she was my favorite character across the entire show. Some of the scenes in her office, just, and the chaos that is in her office, it just felt so real. And her just barking orders and directing people and just cutting through shit just to get the job done. But also some really bad moments, you know, heartbreaking moments. The conversation between her and Shirley Chisholm and about telling Shirley, you know, about her campaign for president, like it's just not going to happen. Was, you know, gut-wrenching. But you you felt for both women, you know, because I just thought there was merit in both their arguments. And that's the harsh reality of politics and campaigns, unfortunately. And lastly, for the left, funnily enough, I've said the left. I guess I should have reframed this as the pro ERA is Jill Ruckelshaus, played by Elizabeth Banks, who is the lone Republican in the crew.
Yeah, I love Elizabeth Banks, mostly because of Pitch Perfect and the Hunger Games films and many others, actually. But Elizabeth Banks plays, the only Republican out of the group that is pro-ERA, and she's really, you know, working hard to get it done and to win over her side of the party, all of which are men. And she's also a mother. She also has a husband who's also involved in the Republican Party, so she's battling you know, what her husband wants her to do and his position and how that affects him, you know, with her own. But this is really silly, but it just never occurred to me that Republican women would be, you know, sitting down next to Gloria Steinem and Shirley Chisholm and, you know, working to get stuff done. So I found her storyline really interesting, a real look at it, you know, I guess a progressive Republican, if you will. She was great.
It's a throwback, and it reminds the audience that they did exist once before, I guess, Reagan and the moral majority and the Christian right just basically ran them all out of their party, and they just are few and far between now. And part of the problem why we've had Trump, I guess. But yeah, it was an absolute throwback to seeing moderate Northern American Northeaster. I don't think she actually is from the Northeast, but you know, Northeast, the old school Republicans before the Republican Party flipped with the Democrats, really.
And I think that's why I found the series so dark, because it ends with sort of, you know, Reagan and going into such a different time. There was so much hope, and then towards the end, it's going to be something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the on the right, the Stop the ERA group. One of the characters I thought was the most interesting out of all of them was Alice Mcrae, who's actually a fictional character and is more of a device than anything, but it's played by Sarah Paulson, who was in, for me, my biggest memory of her acting career is she was in the OJ series. Did you ever watch that?
That was one of the ones where I fell asleep consistently during the first episode and never got through it, which is weird because I am obsessed with the O.J. Simpson trial. But she's also in American Horror Story, which I think have huge fans, like a huge fan base. And she's just widely loved, I think, Sarah Paulson. She's in lots of stuff.
So her character, thoughts on her?
Alice. So Alice is a fictional character. She is a mother, housewife, and she is one of Phyllis's followers. And she goes in to help Phyllis sort of write up media releases and campaign and hold afternoon teas and whatnot. But her character is the most interesting in my mind, out of all the conservative women in the show, because she's the only one that notices Phyllis's sort of manipulation, I suppose. You know, Phyllis is talking about, there were thousands of supporters at our rally, and Alice is the only one that says, well, were they really? She's the only one that questions sort of what Phyllis is saying and perhaps the damage that Phyllis is doing by not completely telling the truth, you know, to the media or in her newsletter. So I did find that I loved her character. And I think we'll talk about a favorite episode later in the show, but she was definitely a standout.
It's hard to. I mean, I've listed in our run sheet here some of the other characters. There was a character called Pamela, who's also a fictional character played by Carly Carter, and there's Rosemary Thompson, played by Melanie Linsky, who's actually a Kiwi actress. I didn't know that until I did the research of the show. But Schlafly's character is so big. It's a huge, big sun that's burning so bright. It's actually kind of hard to see the other characters within the Stop ERA group that they don't really. We don't really learn a lot about them. I don't think any of the episodes are named after them apart from Alice Mcrae's episode. That's a fair. Am I right in saying that? Is that a fair assessment, or are we just not paying attention to the women within the Stop ERA campaign?
No, that's right. There's a few storylines. So there's one of the conservative Stop ERA women is being abused at home, and Phyllis is just turning a blind eye to that. So I found that particularly interesting, you know, in that very sort of what happens at home stays at home. That's none of our business. And that's one of the things that Alice, Sarah Paulson's character, pushes back against. She's like, how can we let this, you know, sort of happen? So, but besides from that, there are no other standout characters from the Stop ERA sort of women. Yeah, probably because Phyllis is such a big character. But that is another criticism of the show. There are probably too many characters. There are besides the main ones that each episode is about, there are so many. I mean, the supporting cast as well, I think we need to go through. Adam Brody is in it, of the OC fame. James Marsden, who's in every film ever made, and I feel like he's like Paul Rudd. He never seems to age. He's still just as handsome as he was in 27 Dresses. And Bobby Carnival, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I probably got that wrong, who is actually Rose Byrne's husband in real life, or partner. There are so many people there are so many great actors in this film. The cast is incredible, but you know, you kind of lose it all. There are too many little subplots and so many great actors doing very, very little. They've just tried to cram too much into one show, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'm completely with you on that one. But if you are the writers, the screenwriters of it, and you do want to cover off such a huge campaign, it's tough to narrow cast, isn't it? Without, you kind of want to give the audience a that's a problem that we all have in life, isn't it? We always want to give context. I'm terrible at this. If I'm going to give a story, I always do too much context. Stephen, ease up on the context. And I think that that's what they've tried to do. They've said, can we give you the context of what it was all like? All right, I'm going to bring in 10,000 characters and let them all do it for us. And maybe that didn't need to happen. Maybe we could have worked it out ourselves by either just say, hey, dude, just Google it, all right? If you haven't worked out what's going on here, just Google it, because we know you're doing it anyway. Or indeed, enable a narrow cast to achieve that for us, I guess, is probably the best way forward for that.
Yes, I would agree.
What other things did you find that the series struggled with, or was a bit of a letdown for you?
I think, the pace for me wasn't great. For me, it was too slow, and the episodes were too long to sort of consume. Too many little sort of irrelevant subplots and sub characters. But besides from that, I thought overall it was a pretty good watch. It was easy to watch.
I thought the subplot of the struggle that we on the left face and continue to face today is dealing with intersectionality and saying it, I feel like some sort of wanker academic when I say that. But it's a huge issue, and I don't think it was addressed enough throughout the series, both intersectionally between the civil rights movement and the feminist movement, but also the LGBT movement. It got touched on maybe 2 or 3 times in the episode in episodes, and that was it. It was like as if, okay, we're done with that. We've addressed that, and let's move on. Whereas I think that it's something that thematically undermines. I think it's a strength. Diversity is such a strong part of the left and our campaigns, but also sometimes it can be an undermining force, and we can get bogged down in it. And I thought that could have been more prominent in the conversation across the 9 episodes. That was the only area that I just thought that it's almost as if they've gone, that's just too hard to deal with. I don't know how to, I don't know how we bridge this in terms of writing the narrative of the series.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoyed those sort of small moments where it was just chaos of the progressive movement battling each other for which issue they were going to tackle that particular day. It's like, no, we can't do this about sexual harassment right now. We have to focus on gay rights, or, vice versa. I love those little moments because they are so true and they are so real. Even today, it's like, where do you start? I think Gloria Steinem said in the show, she's like, how long do we have to wait? And there are all these different causes, there are all these different, things that we want to achieve, and they're always fighting against each other to get it, to be, I guess, in terms of the Labor Party, what we want our policy up and, voted for, and I found those really great moments in the film, but they were small moments.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then what episodes stood out, or what particular episodes stood out for you?
I don't have a favorite episode, but the Houston episode, and I know you love this episode as well, so I'm happy for you to dive into it.
No, you go.
The Houston episode was the best because it brought them all together. So basically it is the National Women's Conference, which has that ever happened in Australia? So a part of the show, watching the show, really made me think about, I don't know anything about sort of the movement in Australia either. I don't know who the Phyllis Schafflee is of, in Australian history, or even, who's the Australian version of Gloria Steinem. And that's very shameful to me. So I need to go away and research sort of the women that have been, pioneered the way in the Labor movement. And now I have lost my track. Anyway, they come together for a National Women's Conference. So it's all of them. It's the Stop ERA Women, it's the feminists, it's everyone. And they converge in Houston, in Texas. And I think it's the first one, and I don't know whether they kept having them after that. But essentially, it's a mess.
Yeah, it's my favorite episode as well. But continue on your thoughts why it is your favorite episode.
Well, I mean, they're trying to get particular things, adopted, into a platform, and they're all on, I guess, I don't know, the conference floor, sort of arguing, and there's a really sweet moment of solidarity when they end up singing together, and but to be honest, the best part is Alice, who is the character who has pushed back against Phyllis this entire time, even though she is conservative and part of the Stop ERA movement. Someone gives her, an acid trip or LSD or something, and she ends up it's nighttime at the conference, she just ends up losing her absolute mind, and going around talking to all these sort of progressive women and having a slight awakening, I think, which was just highly entertaining. That's really the only comedic part of the entire show, is when she is extremely high on drugs. And I'm assuming she doesn't even drink alcohol, so she had no idea what she was doing. She's stumbling around this conference. It would be like going to the after party of, a Labor Party conference and just absolutely wasted.
Yeah. I think that anyone listening to this will love this particular episode. If you've been to like an ALP national conference or an NUS conference or any kind of big sort of political conference that lasts 2, 3, 4 days, where you go to this particular town, you get billeted. Sometimes you get billeted with people you don't know. You're forced into situations where you're hanging out with people you may not like, or you're having conversations. And like all good conferences, all the interesting stuff happens not on the floor, but in the bars and the corridors and the sort of the cafes and whatnot, away from the conference floor. And I think it just did a really good job of capturing that vibe, even for something that was happening in it was a throwback because it was in 1977. So the set that they actually went and used, I remember I did some research about where they filmed it. Now, for the life of me, I forgot, but they did very, very well in getting the set right that gave that kind of conference vibe for the 70s, which I loved as well. And yes, then obviously the introduction to which I think is a turning point for Sarah Paulson's character as well, is so cool and so much fun. I love that episode so much. I could go back and just watch that on its own. It was such a strong episode. And I think it was done, Sarah Paulson's character was done with both humor and sympathy that I loved immensely.
Yeah, I think if you were going to watch one, if you're the kind of weird person that only watches select episodes of TV shows instead of watching them from start to finish, like you should, like they're intended to be watched, you should watch that episode, the Houston episode. It's glorious, and I think anyone who's been to a political conference, I think you're right. I think they'll understand completely. It's very relatable.
Other bits of the show that you wanted to throw out there before we move on to sort of how to stack up in real life and some of our best lines, or any other bits in there that jumped out at you that you want to just throw out?
Well, there? Costumes was obviously a standout. Costumes in the set, the offices that they were in, they're just exactly how you would imagine them. But also the music. Honestly, listen to it for the visuals, the glamour sets, and the costumes and the music alone. Mama Cass, the Rolling Stones, Bob Seger. And I love that music can really lift a series. If you hear a song that it can be really powerful. So I loved the soundtrack, and I think I'm still listening to it the other week.
You're right. It's an excellent soundtrack. And the whoever decided to choose the title track, Beethoven's Symphony, but it's the 1970s version that's on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. They did that deliberately because obviously it's a jazzed up disco version of Beethoven's Symphony. And the reason why they chose that was because a lot of the women in the Stop ERA campaign loved classical music, but they chose this disco version as a homage to the left and their taste in modern disco and modern pop. You're right. It's a great soundtrack. The other thing as well to note is it. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Tess, but it passed the Bechdel test with flying colours.
Yes. I have something to admit. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, wow! Really?
Yeah, I was gonna lie. Can I lie here? Can I lie here? No, I can't.
Okay.
Tell me what this test is.
Well, the irony of a man explaining to you what the Bechdel test is.
Oh my gosh!
is not
no.
lost on me. So
delete.
The Bechdel test, and I forgive me if I stuff this up. There's three things that has to happen in a TV show or a film. It must be two women talking to each other, and they're the only ones in the scene, and they're not talking about men.
Okay. Got it. Interesting. Well, yeah, definitely passes the test.
Yeah, far and away.
Flying colours.
Flying colours. Best lines from the series.
I liked it when, as I was saying, I liked the moments where things were really chaotic and they were trying to get things done and they were fighting about what was important. Gloria Steinem's character said revolutions are messy, people get left behind, which is true. And then the other one that really stood out to me was Jill Ruckelshaus, who was, I think I pronounced that wrong, was the Republican congresswoman who was working with Gloria Steinem. She said she was having a conversation with Phyllis about sexual harassment. So, Republican woman to Republican woman about sexual harassment and how rife it was in Congress and what some of the assistants had to do. And, Phyllis was like, don't some of them ask for it? And at that point, Jill kind of walks out on her, I think, and she says, you want to get ahead on the shoulders of men, Phyllis? Fine, but just know they're looking right at your skirt. And I just thought that was so true. Just given how sexual harassment is still rife, I mean, everywhere, whether you're working in a supermarket or at a law firm or in politics. That really, really kind of hit home for me, I think.
My favourite line from it was Bella Abzug played, which was talking about Phyllis Schafflee. She says that she's a goddamn feminist. Hell, she may be the most liberated woman in America, which was just, I thought it was funny. It was true. It was just getting to this point where, look, Phyllis is doing things. I think she might have actually said it to her, or she was talking about her she might have been within her company, but it was this argument saying, Phyllis, you're having the same challenges within your own life as we are. You are a feminist, for God's sake. Which I thought was very cool and spoke to sort of the complexities within the series itself. How does it stack up in real life?
Well, I actually don't know because I didn't know anything about it sort of before watching it. So if we mean, is it true to life? Was it historically accurate? I'm sure there are people. I mean, to me, it seems that it's a pretty accurate portrayal. I mean, I don't think they portray either side, too badly. But I haven't gone through and really done a serious overview of how accurate it was.
Do you think, if you're a conservative woman and you watch that show, do you think that the Stop ARA campaign has come out of this looking good, or does it actually, further than that, does anyone come out as looking good?
Well, here's the thing. I think that it made the conservative women look like they worked really hard, that they really hustled, and that they knew what they were doing. And, that's essentially what you were saying earlier before, that they respected, the work that they were doing. And I think that came across very fairly to them, that they were actually quite thoughtful about what they were doing, and that they weren't just, sitting around having afternoon teas, but, they were also doing huge mail outs and organising rallies and organizing. But I think what you didn't see was the progressives doing that. You know, they had a whole lot more of the infighting, you know, we've got to do this, and which is true as well. I don't think the progressives would have felt particularly happy about their portrayal in the miniseries, because it kind of just showed them sitting in rooms fighting about stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not actually getting anything done.
Yeah, sometimes it had that kind of Monty Python, Life of Brian, People's Front of Judea vibe about them, didn't it?
Yeah.
The series was actually criticised by Gloria Steinem. She called it ridiculous, lacking in historical accuracy, and said it was bad for American women. And then, interestingly enough, those comments were later disagreed with by fellow second wave feminist Brenda Frieden, who said that the series was extraordinary and stated that, in her view, the nuance of the characters were portrayed very accurately, which I just thought kind of summarised what was going on within those group of leaders. They were all arguing with each other constantly, and they've
absolutely
played it out in real life by talking about the show. One critic wrote, which for me kind of sums it up in some way when we talk about did it stack up in real life, when we think about, you know, the work that we all do in campaigns and left-wing politics. This critic wrote about Miss America, this degree of moral, political and philosophical complexity is what differentiates Mrs. America from so many other recent dramatisations of women's movements past. And that's what hit home for me. I think it's so true of politics and campaigns. It's not cut and dry. It's not black and white. It's not simply good versus evil. It's complex. It's got layers. There are winners and there are losers inside the people who are winning and inside the people who are losing. And there are so many lessons to be learned constantly. And I think that, for me, was the biggest takeaway why I enjoyed the series, was that I finished the show and I went, I don't know who won here and I don't know who lost. But I just felt like there were lessons to be learned from it, and I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, I think looking back on what I took away from it, it's just you're always pushing shit up a hill, right? There's always something, you know. Look how, I mean, it just made me reflect on how much work needs to be done constantly to get anywhere. You know, we're still fighting some of those same battles, you know, around sexual harassment and equal pay. Like, can you believe it? But, you know, this is showing you, you know, why it's so difficult. And it's a constant for anyone that's, you know, an activist or a campaigner. The work never stops.
Did you find that there was hope in this story as a feminist?
I mean, I'm not going to give the ending away, but you know, it doesn't end that well for Phyllis like you think it's going to. But I don't think I found hope, but I was inspired by the work, if that makes sense. I was, you know, I felt like, you know what, you put your head down, you work, you get things done. And it didn't make me feel particularly hopeful for the future that it would be easy. But I feel grateful that there are so many women who just are so resilient and that just keep fighting day after day, decade after decade, you know, in Gloria Steinem's case, right? Like, that's what gave me hope, that there are women out there, millions of them, billions of them, who, you know, who are willing to fight for what they believe in. And that gave me hope.
Here. What rating would you give it? Well, before we do wrap up with ratings, is there anything else you want to add in terms of your thoughts?
I think I've covered it.
You good?
Yep, I'm good.
Rotten Tomatoes gave it 98%. Last week, did we do it out of 5? I think we did it out of 5, but you could do decimal points. What would you rate Mrs. America?
Okay. I think I'm going to give it a low rating. I would give it like 2. I would give it 2.5. This is my reasoning, because I was watching it during lockdown. I think it's the time where we could only walk for an hour a day still. right? And I didn't need that at the time.
Yeah.
I needed a nice warm hug. I needed Schitt's Creek. I needed Grey's Anatomy reruns. I needed Big Mouth. I didn't need sort of more focus on American politics. Do you know what I mean?
I feel bad
So that
now.
kind of tainted my view of it. And there were some parts that I found boring. So I'm going to give it, and my judgment of TV is like, what keeps me interested? What keeps me active? Like, do I want to keep binging? And, it took me a while to sort of work through them. I wasn't staying up until 1 a.m. to keep watching it. So I'm giving it a 2.5, but I feel bad about it.
Wow. Two things. One, I feel bad about that because I was the one who said you should watch it. So now I've completely ruined 90 hours of lockdown for you. Two, geez, you're a harsh critic because you gave The Politician last week 3, I think, and you're giving this 2.5.
I know. I found The Politician more fascinating.
Interesting. Well, I gave The Politician 3.5 last week. I'm giving this 4. I loved Mrs. America. I really enjoyed it. And when it ended, I was like, oh, that's it? And then jumped on IMDb to see if there was plans for a next season, because naturally that's what you think happens with American TV shows. No, they're done. How British of them. How Faulty Towers. No, we're just going to make 9 amazing TV episodes and that's it. We're done.
I think maybe I need to rewatch it out of lockdown.
Maybe.
And see if I can give it a different rating. And I might report back. Because it's tainted. Watching TV in lockdown has tainted my ratings. So we'll see.
Okay.
I might be back.
Well, and for those of you who are listening to this podcast and have watched Mrs. America, or indeed would like to now go ahead and watch Mrs. America, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. You should hit us up on various social media platforms. Dunn Street, hit us up. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Love to know your thoughts. Or if you've got my telephone number, just shoot me a text and I'll read it out. Tess, thank you so much for coming back on the show and breaking down Mrs. America. It's been wonderful.
Thank you for having me. I've loved this. It's been a great review. I've got so much more to learn, haven't we all?
I think we all do. And I reckon, I think this has been a rousing success. So maybe we can get you back on in a month or so and we can unpack something else that's in the same sort of political campaign genre, either film or TV, to review. How about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's see. I hope I haven't lost all of your audience being a repeat guest. So if I do prove to be popular, then I would love to come back on anytime to talk TV or movies.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.